Welcome to Podkey Daily News, your fast brief on power, markets, and what changes next. A FIFA president got checked by his own power base. Traders may soon pay six figures for faster access to presidential posts, and the American West is staring at another round of Colorado River cuts. Those are three very different stories with the same underlying issue: who controls critical systems and who pays when governance fails. The biggest sports governance story is how fast Gianni Infantino's World Cup investment plan blew up. The proposal was to sell up to 20% of a planned $20 billion commercial vehicle tied to World Cup rights, and within days UEFA, CONCACAF, and many national associations were threatening boycotts. UEFA went furthest, voting to boycott all FIFA competitions until the plan was withdrawn and arguing the World Cup is not for sale. The practical concern was simple. Once outside investors are inside a rights vehicle, they may push on formats, venues, and scheduling in ways driven by return targets rather than the sport. The collapse also exposed a leadership problem inside FIFA. Critics called it a political cartel built on patronage. FIFA's own COO said staff had been misled about the details, and talk has now shifted to a no-confidence vote and uncertainty around Infantino's March re-election. What matters next is whether this stays a failed deal or turns into an open succession fight. There's no clear alternative leader, but the episode showed the confederations can still move quickly when they think the presidency has overreached. In U.S. politics and markets, Trump media is offering institutional investors paid access to the Truth API, with reported pricing up to $100,000 a month and some proposals above $1 million a year for the fastest delivery of presidential posts. That matters because if a president's comments move stocks, rates, or crypto, earlier machine-readable access can create a trading edge before the broader public sees or reacts to the message. Former SEC lawyers and market observers say that kind of differential access could create a privileged class of traders and potentially raise insider trading issues. Elizabeth Warren and Adam Schiff have already asked the SEC to investigate. This lands alongside new disclosures showing Donald Trump earned more than $2 billion in the past year, with cryptocurrency ventures and brand-linked products helping drive the total. The broader concern is conflict risk. Presidential influence, private monetization, and market-sensitive communications are getting mixed together in ways critics say would be treated as deeply problematic in most administrations. What to watch is whether regulators treat this as a disclosure and market structure issue or something closer to prohibited selective access. The most consequential domestic infrastructure story is the Colorado River, where the Interior Department's 10-year framework could cut deliveries to Arizona, California, and Nevada by as much as 40% in worst-case conditions. That is water security for more than 40 million people, plus farms, cities, and power systems across the Southwest. Arizona is trying to shape the landing zone by offering a voluntary 20% reduction, essentially half the harshest federal scenario, in hopes of protecting the Phoenix area while keeping a final deal politically survivable. The problem is the structure of the negotiations. States have to revisit allocations every 2 years, which officials fear locks the basin into permanent crisis management instead of a durable settlement. Tensions are also hardening between lower basin states and upstream states like Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, and New Mexico, which resist mandatory cuts they say are unfair, given flows are already down. Litigation threats are now part of the conversation. What matters next is whether the federal government can force a compromise that sticks, because repeated short-term fixes are becoming their own long-term failure. On markets, earnings, and Fed messaging both moved prices hard. Microsoft posted the largest single-day market cap gain ever for a U.S. company, about $450 billion, after results eased worries about whether its spending on data centers and chips was getting ahead of returns. Amazon jumped roughly 15% on stronger cloud sales, while Apple lost more than $350 billion in one day, after concerns about its growth outlook. Meta's losing streak reached 11 straight sessions, its longest ever, with investors still uneasy about heavy AI infrastructure spending, and Universal Music Group fell about 25% after weak earnings and slower streaming growth. On rates, two Fed officials publicly explained votes for recent increases, and that pushed Treasury yields higher across maturities as markets priced a tighter near-term path. The takeaway is that investors are still rewarding spending when they can see revenue leverage and punishing it when they cannot. That divide is driving both stock selection and rate sensitivity. In Russia, what first looked like a possible gas incident in a central Moscow restaurant is now being treated by authorities as an explosion caused by a device, pointing to a possible terror attack. Independent Russian outlets reported a female suspect detonated the device after being stopped by a guard. The significance is less about the location itself and more about pattern. It comes amid a run of attacks and targeted killings involving senior Russian military figures in the capital, which raises fresh questions about domestic security and counterintelligence control. A few quick developments worth tracking. An uncontrolled SpaceX Falcon 9 upper stage is expected to hit the moon at about 9,000 kilometers per hour, likely creating a 27-meter crater and a visible dust plume. It's unusual on its own, but the bigger issue is debris management in increasingly crowded space operations with about 46,000 tracked objects over 10 centimeters and millions of smaller fragments. In medicine, Imperial College researchers used high-intensity focused ultrasound in an early trial to block abnormal placental vessels causing twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome in 10 women. If larger trials confirm safety and effectiveness, this could become a lower-risk alternative to invasive fetal surgery. And in cybersecurity, the UK National Crime Agency says its Cyber Choices program has worked with around 1,000 young offenders since 2017, trying to redirect hacking talent into legitimate security work. Supporters see a practical intervention. Critics worry a voluntary model won't keep pace with cybercrime and could end up sharpening skills without changing behavior. Two lighter but useful stories to end on. Kelsey Fendler rode roughly 4,000 kilometers from California to Hawaii in about 43 days, setting Ocean Rowing Society international speed records and saying her edge came from joy and a relentless focus on the next step. And four Welsh grandmothers who ended up at a pro wrestling event after a seating mix-up have gone viral and may now get the film treatment, which is one of those stories that barely needs improvement. That's the brief for today. You've been listening to Podkey Daily News. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.